Hello, welcome everybody. Actually getting started on time today. Thanks for joining. Today I was going to get into kind of wrapping up the discussion we had yesterday on Trump's mob connections. And I tied a couple of other things together with the Plaza Hotel that I think are really interesting that I want to get into. And then I figured that it will take a couple days to really go over Epstein's intelligence connections. So I think we should start with Robert Maxwell because, a lot of the connections that Ghislaine and Jeffrey had were from him. So that's a good place to start. And we'll get into that after we kind of wrap up the Plaza discussion. But first, I wanted to kind of get to something that's a little bit breaking. I saw this on Twitter just a couple of hours ago. Julie K. Brown is one of the journalists that broke the story and ended up, forcing uh, the arrest and everything that ended up ultimately happening was because of a series of articles that she did for the Miami Herald. So she found in her name in the Epstein files, and it wasn't just like an innocuous mention where she was, obviously a part of the case because she was a major journalist, but she noticed that they were actually tracking her flights, which is pretty crazy. She says, does somebody at the DOJ want to tell me why my American Airlines booking information and flights in July 2019 are part of the Epstein files attached to a grand jury subpoena, as the flight itinerary includes my maiden name, and I did book this flight. Why was the DOJ monitoring me? So she still hasn't gotten an answer back on that yet, but somebody else posted this, which was something else from the Epstein files, one of those emails that were going back and forth between people at the DOJ. Not exactly clear who, but if you look at this, they say, for what it's worth, for your information, Julie Brown is hearing that we're unsealing 4 indictments against co-conspirators this week. So that's really strange. She is hearing. Does that mean that they were yeah, I tried it today, so let's see how it works for everybody. Were they were they tracking not just her movements but actually monitoring her like telephone calls and stuff like that? It looks like she does use Signal from her Twitter because she gives a Signal ID, but it's really weird. She is hearing. How do they know what she is hearing? It's very, very strange. In addition to the fact that they were tracking her flights. So I'm sure that more is going to come out on this, especially like this is super sketch. And, I'm not sure if somebody found this before. I haven't looked through Jeffrey's emails for her name yet, but we could probably do that later. But yeah, this just happened a few hours ago. I'm sure that the DOJ will either ignore it or try to deflect somehow. But this is sketch. I think that this is a very unusual thing to be happening to a journalist. Well, I will say it's unusual for it to be in the public. I'm sure that the government's keeping tabs on a lot of journalists, especially during this administration. And this was during the Trump administration. And I do feel that a lot of people were not very happy with her reporting. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to be keeping a close eye on that and paying attention to how that goes down. I'll be probably keeping notifications on for her posts just in case anything interesting pops up. But yeah, so last night we talked a lot about Roy Cohn, who was Trump's mentor in many ways. And he, taught Trump pretty much most of what he knows about, strong arming people in business and especially blackmail. And, you know, he was a notorious blackmailer who, being a lawyer in New York, he did things that were impossible, like getting mob bosses off of massive charges. He himself was charged with blackmail on numerous occasions. And even with Trump, early in his career, he was able to use blackmail and other strong arm tactics to get Trump what he wanted, whether it was, zoning issues where he only wanted to sell to white people in one circumstance, and he was going to get in trouble for that. Roy Cohn got him out of that. There was a lot of different circumstances where Roy Cohn helped him out. And so notoriously, he also, he was, of course, because he got those mob guys off of their charges, he was deeply involved with the mob. And this story here talks about how Roy Cohn basically brought Trump in to the New York Mafia, introduced him to a lot of different mobsters, including Fat Tony Salerno, Carmine Galante, and Paul Castellano. They are bosses in the Genovese, Bonanno, and Gambino crime families. So, yeah, he maintained those connections through the years. The whole Atlantic City thing is notorious. That city was deeply embedded in the mob, and nobody would really do business with there until Trump came along. And so one of the things that was really, really interesting was the Plaza Hotel and Roy Cohn's involvement there. I tried to show a clip. Yeah, I tried to show a clip from The Apprentice, which I tried to stream like 1 minute of last night, but then they hit me for copyright, and luckily they only like silenced a minute of the stream. They didn't take the whole thing down. But yeah, I'll have to be careful about that now. But yeah, this movie gave an interesting depiction of, how he had like the whole Plaza Hotel wired, and he had all of this blackmail material and all these different people. He had like a collection of tapes, and of course this was a dramatization for the movies, but at the same time, like, this was all based on whether it was court information, which we'll get into later. I'll bring up some of the court documents against him, or just admissions that he made to the police even. There isn't a ton of media reporting about it, unfortunately, but there are court documents that I was able to find. But let's take a look at what the directors from The Apprentice said, because there was some very interesting things in here. Let's see. Yeah, so he says Roy's use of blackmail, and especially tape recordings, phone calls, is well documented. Roy had a woman in the basement who actually ran a switchboard. Yeah, that's the word. I searched for it. And she would tape and listen to all the conversations. I found it so powerful that Roy would basically tape record his own clients for blackmail and for leverage. I thought that this was a way to illustrate to Trump his philosophy for winning, and how you have to be winning to almost betray your own people to win. So yeah, this was something that he was known to do on a regular basis. This is how he got people off their charges. This is how he rose up in the world. And yeah, this says specifically whether Cohn actually used blackmail tapes to help Trump secure a tax abatement for the Grand Hyatt is unknown, but it does seem that the lawyer's dirty tricks were at play in the arrangement. And he was known to do those things, so they just kind of combined that for the story, which happens a lot in movies like that. So a lot of the blackmail went down at the Plaza Hotel, and he had parties that were similar to Epstein's parties, where there were like underage people being taken advantage of, and there was some kind of documentation of it. I guess they would have probably just photographs back then. So this here is some court documentation from back then, and this is showing it, it's a very, very long document. It's over 100 pages, this type, but right here gives the summary. And it says testimony regarding child trafficking investigation from New York State in 1982 regarding specifically the trafficking of underage boys, creation of abuse material, nationwide tracking networks, etc. Testimony includes allegations that international intelligence agencies use these networks to collect information on clients of underage abuse. So yeah, this was one of the cases that Roy Cohn was involved in. Let's see. Trying to see where I was led that by. But yeah, so there are some really, really weird things with the Plaza Hotel. So all of that went down there. And of course, there's the rumors that he had J. Edgar Hoover blackmailed from there, and from a party there, and had a lot of blackmail material on him in general. But there was something that was in here that was talking about, let's see. No, I think that's too far. Let's see. It was down here in the later eras. Yeah, it was in this Trump section. So Trump bought this 2 years after Roy Cohn died. So the hotel where Roy Cohn famously blackmailed a bunch of people, 2 years after he died, Trump bought it for over $400 million. He had Ivana be president, and then there were some issues though later on, because it only like was in under his control for a couple years because he kind of ran it into the ground. But there are some kind of just weird things about it. So like when things were going downhill, it says Citibank, the hotel's creditor, was close to reaching a deal for a Singaporean billionaire, Kwek Leng Bang, and Saudi Prince Al Wahid bin Talib bin I'm not good. I can't do it. I wish I could pronounce Arabic better. To become new partners, owners of the plaza. In an effort to undermine the deal, which was being discussed in the hotel's Vanderbilt suite, a Trump executive hid for 10 days in a secret room of the suite to eavesdrop. Trump still lost. So he hid in a secret room for 10 days to eavesdrop. The detail isn't given here, but I would think that, there's probably some kind of recording devices involved with that, because he can't just like, it's not just like he's hiding in a room where he can hear things in the next room. There has to be some kind of elaborate, operation, which would have some kind of recording devices. So there's that. But another weird angle of this is there's a very real possibility that Trump hosted these same kind of parties for those couple years that he owned the hotel. So there is actually some documentation on that as well. Let's see. Yeah, I think this one. So yeah, this talks about his relationship with Trump's relationship with Epstein, but this talks also about the Plaza Hotel. It says here that Trump was known for hosting parties at the Plaza Hotel, which he owned at the time, that attracted rich men and younger women. And now somebody says if they were checking IDs, it was to make sure the girls were young enough, or it was to make sure the girls were young enough. Yeah. Gross, who's known Trump for 40 years, said jokingly. So this is like a friend of Trump who said that they were checking IDs to make sure that they were young. And now this is like very similar to the type of things we saw in the documents from Jeffrey a couple weeks ago. So there's that, but it actually gets a little bit crazier because there's an entirely different source here that says that drugs were given to the children at these parties, essentially. And I believe that this was even admitted from people who were actually friends with Trump too, and still Trump supporters, not just you know, not just people who don't like him. So let's see what we got here. Republican president. Yeah, that's, I guess so. It was probably an old article. Let's see. Yeah, 2016. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump allegedly held cocaine fueled parties in the 1990s where wealthy old men would hook up with young models, some as young as 15, according to the Daily Mail. The parties were hosted in the New York Plaza Hotel, which Trump owned from 1988 until 1992, when he could no longer manage the debt load and came to an agreement to give up a large share of the building to its creditors, according to sources who attended the parties and spoke to the U.S. news outlet. A photographer who attended some of the parties and wished to remain anonymous said that the models were enticed to attend by being promised that you'll meet rich guys who will help you. And the attraction for the men was young girls assuming they'd get somewhere. He claimed that the girls were as young as 15 and they were over their heads. They had no idea and they ended up in situations, the man told the Daily Beast, according to the report. There were always dramas because the men threw money and drugs at them to keep them enticed. It's based on power and dominating girls who can't push back and can be discarded. There's always someone to pick them back up. Nobody wants to call home and say, help me. So there was another part in here. Trump would allegedly wander through the parties enjoying himself. Trump was in and out. He would wander off with a couple girls. I saw him. He was getting, like crazy. Trump was at the heart of it. He loved the attention. And in private, he was a total beast, he says. Describing his lifestyle before his first marriage. So no, that wasn't that part. So yeah, Andy Lucia, a male model who allegedly organized the parties. So this was the party organizers, and he's a current Trump supporter. And he says, there was cocaine around. I never saw him do that. Donald Trump does not do cocaine. He's in control of himself. So, like, we don't really care if Donald's doing cocaine, but he's like serving cocaine to underage girls, and it's basically admitted by the guy who hosted the party. When asked about the age of the girls, Lucchesi told the Daily Beast that there were a lot of girls. 14 look 24. That's as juicy as I can get. I never asked how old they were. I just partook. What? This guy, I didn't even get to that part when I was looking through this earlier. So this guy's a total creep and just admitting to it and admitting to what was going down at this Plaza Hotel, which was going down under multiple owners. Cohn didn't own it when he was running his operation at the time, but still, I think it's very strange that Trump bought it right after he died. See if there was anything else in there. No. But then, so that was all I had from his time there. I don't know what has happened since he sold it, but because of the fact that a lot of rich people hang out there, it kind of stands to reason that there's always like some kind of drama happening. So, this situation, woman accused of Spitzer blackmail. So yeah, let's see here. So this is basically like the rundown of the story. Svetlana Zarkov is seeking to lift a gag order so she can talk about what she says are Elliot Spitzer's fetishes. In October, Zarkov was sentenced to 90 days for petty larceny conviction for blackmailing the former New York governor in 2016. So the New York governor was blackmailed at this place in 2016, which is just very strange. And let's see if there was another. And yeah, remember earlier when Trump was eavesdropping, or Trump had installed somebody at the Plaza Hotel to eavesdrop when one of the bidders of the place was the Saudi prince. Well, years later, this place continued to exchange hands. And now there was another scandal just a couple years ago, almost 10 years ago now. It's yeah, 9 years ago, where a Saudi prince, I think it's the same one, perhaps. I think it is because that's just a shortened version of what I tried to read, I believe, has partnered with a acquisition corporation to seize ownership from the plaza's landlord, Sabrata Roy, who's been in jail in India for allegedly scamming investors in that country for billions of dollars. So the person who owned it after Trump, at least one of the people who owned it after Trump, is now in jail for stealing billions of dollars from people. And this same Saudi prince was trying to get involved. Now, I didn't really find out what's up with the current ownership. I could look that up right now, though. Owner of Plaza Hotel in New York. See what's up there. I think it might Katara Hospitality. Let's take a look at the history of the place. So it's a luxury hotel and condo building in Midtown Manhattan, west of Fifth Avenue. Let's see some of the history. Icon of New York City. Let's see. Where is this is all like the mechanical description of it. I'm looking for the history. Here we go. The land lots making up the site of present-day Plaza Hotel were first parceled and sold by the government of New York City in 1853. So this is like a really old historical hotel. First one was built in 1883. Let's see some of these people. Eugene and Earl entered into a contract. Let's see. New York Life. I have yeah, so insurance company. Interesting. Okay, so that was just money borrowed from them. I'm trying to like look for names of people or organizations that I recognize or that can have, some involvement in this. Redevelopment in the early 20th century. I'm sure the old stuff is going to be boring, but I'm just kind of looking through just in case because every now and then there's something interesting with that older stuff. In May 1902, a syndicate purchased the plaza and 3 adjacent lots. Let's see, construction, opening, and expansion. Let's see. Most of the public rooms were not originally given formal names. Champagne Porch, 1921. So this is Great Depression. Let's see. Nothing really in there. So it doesn't really start getting interesting until the mid 20th century. Hilton had it. So it looks like it was a Hilton hotel until it might have been a Hilton hotel when Cohn was running his game there. Let's see. Yeah, they merged with Hilton in 1946. Hilton sold the hotel to Boston industrialist Sonny Sonnabend for $15 million in 1953 and immediately leased it back for 2.5 years. So 60s, the financial problems. Western International Hotels. Huh. So that might have been who owned it at the time. This place has exchanged owners a lot and has had a lot of like very high profile shady stuff going on. Let's see if there's anything interesting about the Trump ownership here. Doesn't really look like it. So yeah, this is the situation that we were talking about with the with the Singaporean businessman and the Sultan. Trump was involved with that. Yeah, that sale. So trying to figure out what's going on with it now. So it's continuing to change hands. Where is it at now? So it's Qatar Hospitality. So yeah, that's where it ended up, and that was the path. All right. So, well, yeah, it's worth it to see if there was any leads there. But there is one really final crazy piece that really tripped me out here with this place that I've been leading up to. And that is, so Trump had he held a memorial for Robert Maxwell at the Trump Plaza. And this was the first place, or the first place that no, let's see. No, it's pictured. Yeah. This was the first time that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were pictured together, were seen together in public and taken a picture of. So images that were later widely circulated by prosecutors building a case against the former couple. So that's just another very weird connection. After Maxwell's death, and we're going to get into Maxwell in a minute, Trump held this this memorial service, and this was the first time that Ghislaine and Epstein were photographed together. It's kind of crazy. Um, so yeah, I think that there's a lot going on with that place, and I definitely am going to look more into that. I'm surprised that there hasn't been like a book about all this stuff specifically, or a documentary, because it is a very, very interesting tie-in. But yeah, so Robert Maxwell, he worked for like a bunch of different intelligence agencies, MI6, KGB in Russia, and the Mossad. And so it's like three different countries. And interestingly enough, Epstein has very close connections with Russia, the UK, and Israel, and the US government, of course. So it's definitely strange. And then there's also the fact that they say that Robert Maxwell was the person that introduced Ghislaine Maxwell to Jeffrey Epstein too, and he was the intelligence guy. So, and then there was all this stuff with Epstein coming up through the Dalton School and kind of seeming to be selected to some extent. So there's that whole thing there. And then another very, very weird angle with Robert Maxwell was later in his life. He was alleged to have distributed a bugged version of a software, Promise, to a plethora of national governments and global financial institutions that enabled mass spying by the government of Israel. Maxwell was allegedly able to sell bugged Israeli version of Promise software to Sandia National Laboratories and Los Alamos National Laboratories, two of the most important nuclear research and national security facilities in the United States. Maxwell allegedly employed John Tower, chairman of the United States Senate Committee of Armed Services, to facilitate the sales of the bugged Israeli version of Promise software to Sandia and Los Alamos. So that's pretty nuts. And then there's also the fact that the British Foreign Office suspected Maxwell of being a secret agent of foreign government, possibly a double agent or a triple agent, which meant that he was working for three different intelligence agencies for three different countries. And through thoroughly bad character and almost certainly financed by Russia. He had known links to the British Secret Service intelligence, MI6, the Soviet KGB, and the Israeli intelligence service, Mossad. And this is just like Wikipedia. Shortly before Maxwell's death, Anne Ben Menashe, a former employee of Israel's military Intelligence Directorate approached a number of news organizations in Britain and the US with the allegation that Maxwell and the Daily Mirror's foreign editor, Nicholas Davies, were both longtime agents for Mossad. Ben Manshi also claimed that in 1986, Maxwell informed the Israeli embassy in London that Morodovici Vanunu revealed information about Israel's nuclear capability to the Sunday Times. So, and then Seymour Hersh came out with very similar allegations later. And it was also widely reported that the early funding that Maxwell got to create his to build his media empire was came from British intelligence and possibly the other intelligence services too. But it was known that he was asking around in the British intelligence circles. So I'm gonna actually, there's an old, I don't think that I'm gonna get hit with copyright for this because it's such an old documentary, but it is, I'm just gonna play a couple of minutes on this, and it's quite interesting to see um, just how he was described at the time and how everything went down with him. And given all this information, it really makes the whole Epstein situation make a lot more sense. So
His solution was the appointment of Peter Walker.
let's see. I'm probably gonna speed this up a little bit too. Let's see.
Burdened by debts and facing exposure as a fraudulent bankrupt.
Hopefully it's
Robert Maxwell retreated during his last days into memories of his childhood and origins. 3 years earlier, it was so different. Maxwell invited 1,000 admirers to his Oxford mansion to celebrate.
ooh. Why are they doing this to me? It's probably because I tried to queue it up. I'll just give it a minute and I'll provide some context for it. So the main story that's kind of going to be told here is that Maxwell built this massive media empire, and even after like he had an early career as a scammer, and then he started to build all these contacts, and then by the end of his life, it had turned out that he was ultimately a scammer in the end as well. And then he died very mysteriously, just like Epstein did. So let us see. Oh man, it's still not giving me the see if I can. Wow, that's really
His 65th birthday party.
why?
Politicians and bankers hailed the tycoon.
If it quits, I'm not gonna keep on trying, but we'll see. I'll give it one more shot. I think it was because I had two YouTube windows open.
20 years earlier.
Maybe not. Well, if that doesn't work,
Maxwell had been condemned by government inspectors as a fraudster, but now he had re-established himself, trusted by the world's bankers.
He's the boss of the Credit Lyonnais.
All right, so yeah, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pause it, and what we can do is we can look at that that web, and we can kind of look at this guy's connections, because I that would probably be better than just putting that on, because there are some parts of that I think provide great context, and it really helps to kind of see the actual video footage of these people's lives that lived quite a while ago. But yeah, let me bring up this other site that we were looking at, because they had a whole section just dedicated to Maxwell's connections. And that's really how important he is to this whole thing. Yeah, I know. Let's see. I always have issues. I'll just share this different screen real quick. And then we'll go to this web here and we'll check out all of Robert Maxwell's connections. Because it was really, it took me a minute to figure it out the other night. Hopefully they still have, did they take it away? No, okay, yeah. Yeah, hopefully everybody could see that. And this is something that slows down the load too. So hopefully we can get this with my rural internet here. So all of these connections over here are from Robert Maxwell. You could see, let's see. Wow. Why did that? Let me try to redo this because this is, we were doing this on stream the other night and it was working just fine. Let's see. Robert. Yeah, he's right over here. All right, let's see if we can zoom in on him. Yeah, all right, this is working. Cool, cool. So he is connected to all of these people here. This is constantly being changed, though. Let's see if we can. Minimum mentions 5. Let's. They're trying to get me to sign in again. Next time I will get a get an account for this so they can give me a bit of a better view. There's Elliot Spitzer. That's the guy that we were just talking about getting blackmailed. He appears in 20 documents, primarily through news articles about him returning $50,000 in campaign contributions. Okay. Not that interesting. All right, I think I got some of this loaded up here. Let's give this a shot again. Up.
Michael Richardson was
Every time I click on it,
among
I'll
the
just
city's
say
bankers and brokers whose disregard of the past endorsed Maxwell's claim to honesty. The testimonials were vital to restore his credibility.
I would like to ask a very long-standing friend of my father's to come and speak on behalf of the guest, Mike Richardson.
Bertie and Bob, this must be the party of the decade. All of us are very proud to be here because I believe you made a major contribution to all our lives. So on behalf of all your guests, thank you both very much indeed.
I'm, of course, very notorious about many things, but very few people really appreciate that everything that I have done with the help of thousands of people has only been made possible because of Pergamon Press.
Pergamon was Maxwell's brainchild. Despite his lack of education, he'd earned millions by creating one of the world's leading scientific publishers. He'd used his money to buy publicity, win a Labour seat in the House of Commons, and provide luxury for his 9 children.
We both teach them that having money isn't just everything. The privilege of money also imposes duties and limitations.
By 1969, Maxwell's uncontrolled ambition was shuddering towards catastrophe. His bid for the news of the world was defeated by Rupert Murdoch.
Mr. Maxwell called me a moth-eaten kangaroo. Well, I've never got quite to that stage.
Employees began to understand the Maxwell style of business.
I said, Mr. Maxwell, you're the sincerest liar I've ever met. And his reaction was to laugh, because I generally think he took that as one of the nicest compliments I could have paid him.
During his sale of Pergamon, his financial accounts were found to be fraudulent, and he was condemned by government inspectors as unfit to manage a publicly owned company. Cast into the wilderness, Maxwell had lost most of his fortune and was condemned as a crook.
For all practical purposes, I should have been dead and gone then. It feels awful. I lost 5 years of my life. But to me, I dusted myself down and got up and got on with the job. I never give up.
By 19...
That basically showed how, early in his business career, he, had all these issues and failures, and also kind of had this rivalry with Rupert Murdoch. And yeah, exactly. He had it really, really bad, condemned to only 50 rooms and 25 servants. But yeah, it's very, very interesting how similar he is to actually Epstein, because of the whole, like, just scamming people and having, all this money come out of nowhere. But yeah, the Rupert Murdoch relationship is interesting because they were rivals, but they also worked together in many cases towards the end. And also, Ghislaine ended up having a very positive relationship with Rupert Murdoch after her father's death.
1984, Maxwell had bounced back. He'd earned millions after buying Britain's biggest printing company. Then he bought the Daily Mirror. Maxwell became a multimillionaire overnight. Hailed as a savior, he sought his revenge against Rupert Murdoch.
I am committed to getting the mirror on top of the sun. I have set myself a target of 2 years to achieve the goal. What do you think of this meeting?
It's excellent.
Good, it hasn't started. If you wait and I certainly have a major say in the political line of the paper. I certainly have a major say on the editorials.
Unleashing a wave of vanity appearances, Maxwell suffocated most doubts about his credibility.
Yeah, so that admission right there was basically him saying that he controls the media. He has control of the editorial side and everything like that, which is kind of wild. The other thing, that whole media angle, what I forgot to mention earlier on the Trump conversation, one of Roy Cohn's best friends ended up becoming the owner of the National Enquirer, which was one of the publications that ended up really, really boosting Trump's career early on when he was just a New York real estate developer. It was one of the publications that really turned him into a celebrity.
There are instant prizes to be won. I'm waiting to make one of you a millionaire.
I don't honestly think that you would find from anyone around at that time in Mirror Group, at whatever level, would say this man's going to do something dreadful. He's a crook, and crooks never reform.
I keep on repeating, I'll say it for the last time, I'm not on some ego trip.
In 1987, Maxwell renamed his empire the Maxwell Communications Corporation.
Robert Maxwell is a multifaceted individual, businessman, politician, family man, publisher, and a man who speaks 9 languages. He is an international figure, an intimate confidant of heads of state.
Maxwell personally dictated his own publicity.
Why don't you?
Yeah, that whole speaks 9 languages or whatever. Of course, he's dictating his own publicity. These people, they all, like, with the very spectacular, obviously wrong admissions. It's crazy.
Quote Goldman Sachs that says if only all other British businessmen were like Mr. Robert Maxwell. That's the best quote that you can get. The other thing that you cannot say about him is Mr. Maxwell's a many-sided man. You've got to deal with the issues. What else I am? That's in politics.
Unquestioning executives helped to mold the Maxwell image.
The many-sided Maxwell. Where has he got to?
Sir.
To satisfy his obsession to overtake Murdoch, Maxwell sought opportunities to exaggerate his wealth.
Look at Mr. Murdoch's achievements and look at mine. Both of us are candidates for one of the top positions as a media company of the world, one of the 10 slots.
He's doing very well. I'm not doing too badly. The difference between him and me is that he owes the banks $6 billion. And until I get Macmillan, the banks owe me $1 billion. People prefer the Maxwell position to that of Miller.
In 1988, Maxwell fed his ambitions to join the Big Ten Club. He bought the official airlines guide, and then the American publishing giant Macmillan. Over £3 billion of his money was borrowed from banks.
I was one of 2 non-executive directors at that time. As far as I know, no bank or any other body ever approached us with a single question about the basis on which they were going to lend the money or anything to do with it.
And was it a lot of money?
Oh, yes. It was about $3 billion. But it was without security, and I must say I was pretty amazed at that.
Maxwell was convinced that by juggling his accounts, he could repay the loans. Reality was concealed. Despite the recession, rising interest rates and falling profits, Maxwell boasted that he was earning increased profits. The stage was set for his final major fraud.
It's a human error.
So my foot.
At the heart of his empire, Maxwell trusted just 2 people. In business, he trusted only Kevin, his 30-year-old son. Estranged from his wife, Maxwell relied emotionally upon Andrea Martin, his personal assistant.
Well, on some occasions, she would just arrive and kick off her shoes and throw herself on one of the chairs or settee, and RM would say, let's have champagne, never-ending champagne, Douglas, and smoked salmon or caviar, whatever took his fancy. And that was my instructions, and that's what I had to serve.
That's something else.
Yes, we do need to do. Trying to get him on the phone.
Very closely. Well, it should.
And logistically, that like had to be so much harder back then than it is now.
By their attitude towards one another. I smelt it, the endearments. I would say he was besotted by her.
However, from Andrea Martin's point of view, the relationship with Robert Maxwell was purely professional.
Yes, I have.
So yeah, I'm gonna fast forward it to kind of cut out the middle a little bit, but in the middle they talk about how he was essentially stealing from the pension funds of the companies that he was running, and he was stealing a whole bunch of money, and the businesses were going bankrupt, and he ultimately got caught. So you know, and then once he got caught, there was a big controversy that he tried to worm his way out of yet again. And then there was also an interesting business that he had that was likely connected to intelligence. So let's see if the YouTube gods here will. I'm going to try to refresh and see if I could. Let's see. If not, I can just leave it there with that and finish the rest of the story on my own. And
the
then
pressure was mounting. As the banks pressed harder for repayment of debts, the Maxwells pledged more shares owned by the pension funds, this time in an Israeli company called Tiva. Ignoring his finances and the latest theft of pension fund shares, Maxwell flew to New York and indulged his fantasy as an international tycoon. He bought the Daily News. Overnight, he was an American star.
He was just delighted with, that he had this paper, like a big toy, and everything, as far as he was concerned, was going good.
The new owner of the Daily News, Bob Maxwell. Bob.
The paper's new owner, British publisher Robert Maxwell, on hand for the big event. He was there to start the big printing presses rolling once again, and he came into the factory to the roar of cheers.
Posing as the savior of the news, Maxwell's real problem was to save his empire. One problem was MCC's worsening image. His solution was the appointment of Peter Walker, the politician, as his successor and chairman. Brought to New York, Walker was introduced to Macmillan's tax specialist to prove the empire's profitability.
Peter Walker was a very smart guy, and he came to the conclusion that the company was not as profitable as Maxwell had led him to believe. Maxwell was trying to puff the profits. I believe he saw right through that, and he probably wasn't interested in carrying on.
Weeks later, Walker silently resigned without commenting publicly on his discoveries. In total, he took £500,000. His severance agreement was signed by Michael Richardson. Maxwell naturally benefited by Walker's silence. Another person who could have warned of Maxwell's operations was Lord Donoghu. When Lord Donoghu resigned, he took £50,000 in return for keeping quiet. The directors of First Tokyo also decided on silence.
We didn't sort of put up a flag and say that here are crooks. I acted throughout on legal advice.
So hopefully it'll allow me to skip a little bit ahead again and get to his untimely end. Let's see. If not, I could bring up an article. And then there's
to return to speak at an Anglo-Israeli dinner.
Of all nights that my
let's see.
father would have wished to have been present, this, I think, would be it.
At that moment,
went too far.
The wage. It was complete.
He must have been terribly worried because there was an unusual telephone call from him, a subdued tone of voice. And why are people trying to destroy me? Tell me why. He thought there was a conspiracy to destroy him.
during the night of 29th October, Maxwell decided to fly to his yacht anchored in Gibraltar.
He put his arms around me and generally embraced me and said, "Thanks for everything."
He said, "You know, Mr. Wheeler, you're my oldest friend." I said, "Mr. Maxwell, you mean I'm your only friend?" He said, "I think you're right."
At 6 a.m., he flew from the rooftop in Holborn to his Gulfstream at Luton Airport.
He seemed in a fairly good mood. He said he was going down to get some warm air because he had a cold.
3 hours later, he boarded his yacht.
Very pleasant, good man. He was still trying to get rid of this cold that he couldn't shake off.
At the captain's suggestion, they sailed to Madeira, a 2-day voyage filmed by a crewman.
He was reading papers, watching movies, generally trying to relax and enjoy it.
On the captain's recommendation, Maxwell agreed to head for the Canary Islands.
We left in time to get to Tenerife the following morning.
You'll be here in 1 minute.
During that journey, the Gulfstream pilot asked for permission to fly low over the Lady Ghislaine.
It came to our mind that it would be a good occasion to do some low-level flying, which we knew Mr. Maxwell liked.
On their arrival in the Canaries, Maxwell ordered the captain to look for calm sea.
He wanted to do some swimming that afternoon.
After his swim, everyone believed that Maxwell was returning to London.
He was in a fairly good mood. He'd enjoyed his time on the yacht. His cold appeared to be getting better, he said, and he was expecting us to fly back to England the following day.
A brief call to London had confirmed that the financial position remained dire. All 3 banks had carried out their threats. 2 had sold shares and 1 had summoned the police. Maxwell told Ian that he was still too ill to return to speak at an Anglo-Israeli dinner.
Of all nights that my father would have wished to have been present, this, I think, would be it.
At that moment, Robert Maxwell was driving towards Tenerife's best hotel. He gave no impression of being concerned by his plight.
He went ashore that night for dinner. He had a good meal. Came back to the boat, jovial mood. He slept much better at night when the boat was at sea.
That night, on a course plotted by Rankin, the yacht circumnavigated the islands. Before midnight, Maxwell gave his last instruction.
I don't want to receive any more phone calls. I'm going to sleep. This was not an unusual request. I was on watch until 12 midnight, And at that point, as far as I knew, it was an uneventful night. I went to sleep.
4 hours later, with no other boat on the radar, Maxwell emerged on the deck. He met the engineer. His cabin, he complained, was too hot. The air conditioning should be adjusted. 30 minutes later, Maxwell phoned the bridge to complain again.
He mentioned the cabin temperature could be adjusted, and that was the last call the crew received from him.
During the next 2 hours, before the crew began their daily chores, Robert Maxwell went overboard into the sea. At 11 o'clock that morning, anchored off southern Tenerife, Rankin connected a telephone call from New York to Maxwell's cabin. When he received no reply, Rankin's reaction was...
surprise. The reaction now is, where is he? So we went up and looked in all the usual places and couldn't find him. It required my key to unlock the door, and then it opened, expecting him to be in the bed or something, and nobody was there.
So he just disappeared.
At some point, it sinks in that this person is not on the boat.
This is Mr. Ian Maxwell and Mr. Kevin Maxwell. Evening.
Remarkably composed, I thought.
Yeah, so dude just disappeared. And the other weird thing about
It was almost as though they were prepared for it.
It's very sad.
The other weird thing about this is that boat has exchanged a bunch of interesting hands. Robert Maxwell's yacht. Let's see. Yeah, so let's take a look at this yacht here. This is the yacht where he disappeared. And so this was built for Ahmad Khashoggi. This is, I believe, related to the Khashoggi that was killed, by the Saudis recently, that there was all that controversy about. And then it was later purchased by Robert Maxwell. And it's said that he died while drowning, even though I don't believe his body was ever found. Now, the new owner is Anna Murdoch. And she is from the wife of Rupert Murdoch. So it's very interesting that, I mean, I know that the amount of people that can afford a yacht is very small. So, of course, you're probably going to recognize the names of the people that have the ownership of it, but it's still a kind of a weird thing.
Of the two coronary arteries. We concluded that the probable cause of death was a heart attack.
I guess it was found then.
By the time the body was flown to Israel for burial, Lamella's verdict was already disputed. Maxwell's death had become a mystery, open to speculation.
I think that it could have been that he was murdered. The last thing that we saw that he committed suicide.
A second autopsy was performed on the dissected and embalmed body by Dr. Ian West.
There's no sign, for instance, of the usual pattern of injuries that one sees in a person who's been assaulted.
So you concluded?
The murder was very unlikely.
The Spaniards' finding against drowning because no water was found in Maxwell's lungs was contradicted by West.
In the lung, there was a lot of froth, which both the Israeli pathologists and myself noted. And that was consistent with drowning. I think that probably death is due to drowning. I can't prove it.
Considering Maxwell's imminent bankruptcy, West speculated that Maxwell had committed suicide.
You've got to look for a motive, why this man may have decided to kill himself. There is not sufficient evidence to prove, beyond all reasonable doubt, that he killed himself. So a suicide verdict could not be brought.
The known facts are that in the weeks before his death, Maxwell was certainly unwell.
He had quite severe lung disease, and this had produced a strain on the heart. He also had some coronary artery disease and an enlarged heart. He could have dropped dead on the deck.
Maxwell's illness adds to the probability that the likely cause of death was an accident. Feeling unwell, he had returned to the deck and moved towards the rail.
We know from the damage on his muscles that he's been hanging on to something for a while.
The painfully torn muscles show that Maxwell slipped before falling into the sea.
Got one of the handrails in his left hand, and he slips. Hangs there for a second, can't hold his weight, and then goes into the water.
But he obviously did topple over the rail. Anybody could topple over the rail. It wasn't impossible at all. Anybody
So
could
now
topple
it's just
over.
people basically speculating about what happened. But you know, it's still a mystery to this day, and it's just wild how many people connected to this group are both involved with intelligence and meet these kind of weird fates. And of course, he was, you know, that as they're saying, he was probably on his way out anyway. Still quite interesting. But before I sign out for the night, I can't go too long tonight because tomorrow is a work day and I gotta get up early. But I did want to look at the emails to see if there were any mentions of Julie Brown in here because of the issue that I talked about earlier in the broadcast with how she basically discovered that the Department of Justice was watching her watching her flight records, and also there were issues with there was that shady email that we saw between people at the Department of Justice where they knew what she was hearing, like she was hearing from different witnesses. So I'm looking through here just to see if there is anything. Of course, at this time, I don't have any reason to believe that Epstein would have had a you know, a direct line with the Department of Justice because of the fact that they were on opposing sides at this point. But I know that he was definitely quite threatened by the work that she was doing and the research that she was doing. And because we found that name in the files, I'm just kind of curious. What is okay? So this is mostly boring stuff going back and forth between people that he wants to involve in his dialogue. Here's it's talking about the Herald stories. So this might be good. What do we got here? Somebody's sending him the article because I think these go 11. Yeah, they actually set these up to go from top to bottom, the people that set up this interface. So it looks like just articles being sent to him. There was another thing that I found that I'll share in a minute that was kind of weird. There's more just sending him the article. And it's a lot of redacted stuff in here. Because you could see privilege redacted. That means that something in there is redacted. This is, by the way, if you haven't seen this on stream before, this is jmail.world. These developers have basically taken all of the email records and they have put it into an easy to read Gmail interface. These are the Yahoo emails that were taken, but you know, it's just an easy to read interface. And that's kind of how they tell you that something's been redacted instead of just having the big black bar. Let's see what we got. Just people sending him the article. That's the only time she really appears, it looks like. Yeah, and a bunch of redacted stuff. So here's the funny thing. The other day, I came across this when I first found this resource. I came across this message right here, and I didn't look at the other. I just assumed somebody had gotten a hold of his email and messaged that. I didn't even assume that this was a person that knew him that said, "You are dead, LOL, good riddance." But when I was looking around at some other emails, I found out that this person has a long email history with Epstein. Let's see if I can actually bring it up. I think it's going a little bit slower today because I'm going in 1080p. Let's see. Yeah, she goes by Julie K. Brown on Twitter. So why is Jeep Project in his Yahoo? JEE Project. What? That's kind of weird. That Amazon orders. Is that the right email? JEE Project. Why is he getting Amazon orders from somebody who sent him an email that said, LOL, you are dead, good riddance? That's tripping me out a little bit. So this is Jeep Project to and the email that this is a part of is JEE Vacation, I believe. No, that was him. Let me take a look at this again. If I was reading the wrong thing. Oh no, wait. Oh, it's redacted. That's why. I thought that yeah, okay. Never mind then. I'm seeing ghosts. Yeah, nah, that's the only one from him. So it is somebody that got a hold of his thing. So yeah, it's jmail.world is the website for this. Yeah, let me put it in the chat. .world. And you can access, you see on the bottom there is all of those buttons. This is where you can access all the photos that were released in the pictures or in the files. And actually there's some like look at this. This tells me like Russian intelligence. Like so maybe they're all triple agents, you know what I mean? They also have the flight records, which we went through on stream. I have a video about that I put out a few days ago, and the text messages here that I went through as well. And I found one of these guys was the Polish president that was texting with Epstein in the days, like just the day he met with Trump, and then he met with him a day later. Yeah, let's see. Where is that? Oh, yeah, it's Andre something, right? Why isn't he in here? Ah, yeah. No. Huh. He's not in here anymore. I have the video of it. I wonder if they took him down. Well, yeah, so that's Jmail and how you use it. It is really crazy. It's, because of how hard it was to navigate, a bunch of developers just built all of these interfaces that you can walk through and, find it out much easier. What's the doc? Oh, I'm not sure. The documentary. I'm not sure about that. The one we watched? It was like the downfall of Robert Maxwell. Or you're talking in the chat. Gotcha. So yeah, I think that covers what I'm gonna do tonight. Tomorrow, probably get more into Epstein's mafia connections and his intelligence connections. I think the thing today is pretty crazy, though, that the whole situation with the Plaza Hotel, how Roy Cohn was blackmailing people out of there. Trump bought it 2 years after he died, and then he ran his own sketchy parties there that people admit to. And then he eavesdropped on his potential buyers. So there's just a very, very weird history there. But yeah, thanks for joining me tonight, and I will catch you tomorrow. Peace.